Good morning. It is Wednesday morning, and I found a relatively quiet spot here in Yerba Buena Gardens to record this outside in the fresh air, one of my favorite places to be. This morning, I had breakfast with a couple of colleagues and friends, which was great. It was really nice to do that. And then I went to two sessions. I want to talk about those briefly. So the first one was from two Forrester analysts, and they introduced this framework called AGIS, Guardrails for Securing Agentic AI in the Enterprise, right? So it's something we need, clearly. And a couple of things. They started out by reflecting on some survey data. So Forrester obviously has a whole machine for collecting high-quality survey data from enterprise practitioners. And this one was about the adoption of AI. And clearly, no surprise there, right? It's enormous and it's accelerating. And they indicated, this is from the fall, so it's probably out of date at this point, but it was among the enterprises, 24% have agentic AI systems in production and 50% are piloting. And I think we can certainly imagine that probably those numbers have flipped, if not even a higher number in production right now. And obviously, things are moving really quickly. And I think the Forrester folks didn't say this. I heard this reflected in a couple other presentations, but I do believe this as well, which is that we are seeing really the next generation of tech debt unfolding before our eyes. So we really have to get in front of this. And the good news about it is that this isn't groundbreaking rocket science that we have to do, right? Some of this is the basics of governance and controls around what is going on in the enterprise and what's being deployed in our environment. All right, that's a little bit of a soapbox. So for the Forrester session, they talked about the framework built on, I'm going to rattle these off, and you've heard of every single one of these things before. GRC, IAM, data security and privacy, AppSec, threat management, and zero trust network access. So there's nothing new under the sun in the sense of doing these things properly and applying them to agentic AI systems. And the interesting thing I thought Forrester brought was to recognize that we traditionally have human identities and non-human identities or service accounts, things like that, right? And agents are really in between. So you have to treat them as a third type of thing. And they're different than people, clearly. They're different than non-human identities or standard machine identities because they are unpredictable. So you need to build that into your operating model, and the way that you approach it is that they're in between. They should have human owners, but they're independent. The other thing is that they talked about, Forrester, is I felt like some of the guidance was really not realistic. So for example, they said, track the provenance and lineage for every data set, embedding, store, and prompt template. And from an application security perspective, gate every model and tool through centralized enforcement points and to authenticate, authorize, and log. So it's, unfortunately, especially from the data perspective, that's not realistic. You cannot expect an enterprise that today barely does joiner, mover, lever, and turns off access when someone leaves the organization to be able to track the provenance of every data element in their organization. So I felt it was a lot more about the what to do than the how to do it. And I really think that organizations today need guidance on specifics of the how and not on the what. I feel like we've been talking about the what, certainly for security in general and for zero trust for quite a while. And now they need guidance on the specifics of what for that and for agentic AI. The next session was an interesting one. It was presented by Jason Clinton, who was the deputy CISO at Anthropic, and Sarah Novotny, who leads the MCP security research group at Oasis as standards organization. So that was great. They talked about MCP, they introduced the concepts, and they talked about a security model that they put around that. So one thing I thought that was interesting was that they introduced the notion of, look, I know that we're sometimes struggle with agents, AI agents being so stochastic and unpredictable, but the reality is that we've been dealing with those stochastic and unpredictable agents, right, AKA people, for decades. So we have knowledge and skills and controls and mechanisms to handle that. Now, people are not agents, and agents behave differently, and they're much more subject to threats than people are, and they operate machine scale. But don't forget that we do have controls and processes from a technical perspective, from a governance perspective, that can and should and really must be applied to our agents. The other thing I took away from that was, real quick, from an operational, from a controls, and from a monitoring perspective, that they actually highlighted something we heard from Francis, the head of security products at Google, which is that many single-purpose focused agents are much easier to manage than one general-purpose agent. And this is not just from a complexity perspective, but from an operational, a logging perspective, and the ability to detect anomalous behavior, the ability to do prompt injection filtering, all of those things get 10 times easier, if not more, when you have a very clearly defined set of problems that a given agent is trying to solve versus a general purpose agent that can handle anything. So that's my guidance for the morning, and I've got some more work to do today, and I'll report back later. Thank you.